fans, and welcome to another edition of the Terry Collins Show. I'm John Arezzi, and joining me, as always, the former skipper of the New York Mets and analyst for SNY's Baseball Night in New York, Mr. Terry Collins. Terry, welcome back for another week.
Thanks, John. I'm excited. It's always fun to do these, and I think we have a great show today. We're going to have some guests on today. We're going to discuss the pitching situation where, injuries have just absolutely been an epidemic here at the major league level, even in the minor leagues. And we're going to talk to some of the best pitching coaches that I've ever been around, and I've been around a lot of them in my career, and hear what they have to say about, see how, what they can come up with to try to keep this from spreading.
Yeah, it is certainly an epidemic, and it's getting more and more coverage, Terry. I mean, there's a lot of experts that are weighing in on this, a lot of old timers. When I say old timers, guys who have been in the game for many, many years, and they see this shift, this change, how so many guys are getting hurt. So it's going to be a fascinating discussion today on Talking with TC. I'm really looking forward to it. We have to talk about the Mets, right? Each week is a different story with the team. This week, they kind of limped out at Tropicana Field in Tampa Bay after getting swept in a place that a lot of people call the House of Horrors. The Mets have not won there since 2015, but they come and bounce back. They go to St. Louis. They win a couple games in a row. Alonso's bat catches fire all of a sudden, which is great to see. They now head back to Citi Field this weekend, but you say ass in the jackpot sometimes. This time it's maybe ass in the fire, because you're taking on the Braves and then the Phillies back to back, and the Phillies are NL East leaders, red hot. What are your observations right now about the Mets? Does anything stand out to you when you watch the team right now?
Well, obviously, everybody knew when they left spring training, when Senga got hurt, that the rotation was maybe in disarray, and then you get McGill get hurt. You've got a couple guys who haven't, Hauser hasn't pitched the way they were hoping he would pitch. So, and that's where it all starts. It all starts with the starting pitching. And when you get good starting pitching, you can get deep into a game, allows your lineup to score some runs. And then you can get that bridge to Diaz. Those guys set up in different roles in different situations where they can contribute, and even though I know relief pitching is different today because you've got to throw to three hitters most of the time. So it's a little different, but you know what? Their lineup is still good. You know what I like? I think if they just, again, going into St. Louis, win a couple games in St. Louis right now, they're back close to 500. And I think when that lineup gets hot, and we've seen some bright spots. I mean, I thought, they've come back in a lot of games, and they're dangerous. They've got a lot of weapons in the middle of that lineup. They can do some damage. And when, you've got, I think Lindor is one of the big keys, because he's starting to swing the bat left-handed a lot better than he did in the beginning. So he's going to be a big impact. And I think JD, he's going to take some at-bats. It may be 50, 60 at-bats before JD really gets himself in form. So I think they're going to be fine. It's all about making sure they get that starting pitching rearranged.
Yeah, get that starting pitching rearranged. And then, of course, McNeil, Lindor, as you mentioned, Alonso, your core guys. You throw JD into the mix. You got Bader. You got DJ Stewart, who really hits clutch this season so far, as they wait for Alvarez to come back. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but consistency happens during time, and getting that pitching situation intact. And we'll go over a little bit more pitching in just a minute. But when you're in a stretch like this, when it comes to a team where you're up and down, you're a roller coaster, you get swept in a place and you're losing 5 of 6 or 7 of 8. What do you do as a manager during the middle of a stretch of those types of games and that type of week where you're not actually putting up the W's?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, John, but the one thing you can't do, especially at this particular time of year, you can't overreact. You can't panic, because let me tell you something, when the players see the manager panic, they panic. And so you've got to try to keep that even keel, go to the ballpark. There's no sense in having big meetings right now. You're running because you're running into some, once in a while, you're going to lose 3 and run. By the way, Tampa Bay is won their division, win that Eastern Division a couple of times. So they got some pretty good players too. So again, you got to maintain some things. You might want to have some individual talks with some guys who are slumping a little bit. Try to keep their confidence up a little high, knowing that there's going to be good times and bad times. But the one thing you can't do is start to worry about, we got to change the lineup. Oh, we got to start bringing up new guys or sending guys down, because that shows panic in the organization, and that's tough for big league players.
Yeah, it certainly is. Mets owner Steve Cohen actually weighed in, acknowledged the slump on X. He's got an X account, and he does post every now and then. And this post said, "Tough weekend in Tampa can be frustrating, but these are the ebbs and flows of a season. Prospect wise, I love how aggressive we are promoting our young talent at all levels. There are lots of new names that make our future bright. Let's go Mets." And you segue right into one of those new names, Terry, was pitching prospect Christian Scott, who made a very impressive debut this past Saturday. He went 6 and 2/3, allowed 5 hits. He struck out six, gave up one walk, only one run, and that was in the first inning. He did have a rough first inning, but he settled down and he turned a lot of heads in his debut. A very poised young man. Terry, your thoughts on Christian Scott making his debut?
Well, I've been around a lot of those guys, those rookies when they come up, and the one thing you want to try to do is make sure they understand it's the same game played by better players. So you don't want to get away from whatever got you to the big leagues will keep you in the big leagues. Maybe you have to refine command of certain things, but your stuff is going to play up there, and that's why they called you up. And I think after that rough first inning, he finally said, "You know what? I can get these guys out if I make pitches." So he kind of settled down, made some pitches later, showed his stuff, showed his that he's got confidence in what he can do, what he has, his stuff plays in the big leagues, and so he finished out strong, and I think that's a great step forward. He's going to have a tough one, make no mistake about it. He's going to have a night where he's going to hang a pitch and somebody's going to bang one out, and but that's all. Again, that's all part of it. The greatest pitchers that have ever pitched in this game at any level at any time have had bad games. So, but I was very impressed with the way he handled himself, and hopefully, he can get on a roll here and help him out.
Yeah. Well, you've seen enough over the course of your career, especially during the heyday with the Mets. You saw a lot of exciting debuts. Jacob DeGrom, Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, Steven Matz, and others for sure. What advice do you give to a highly touted prospect before their first MLB start? And what should be their goal of a young pitcher making their debut?
The biggest thing is trust yourself. Trust yourself. And that's what you tell every guy that's up there. Say, listen, hey, look, if you go out and make your pitches, you're going to be fine. You've got good stuff, and that's why you're here. You have major league pitches. Use them all. Don't be afraid don't be afraid to, throw a 2-0 breaking ball to somebody. You have confidence in what you have. And of course, those guys had plus stuff. They all had plus stuff, including Zach Wheeler, by the way. He made his major league outing with us too. And the same thing. And, there were times when, and those guys, most of them really had real good command of their stuff. I mean, Noah came up, he threw very, very hard, used a lot of pitches early in the game. So he was at that back then, he was a 5-inning guy because he was 100 pitches in 5 innings. And when he finally realized that he could get outs with his two-seam fastball, all of a sudden he just shot up. But again, you've got to learn from what you do once you get into a game, but be the guy that got you there, and because that's what's going to work the most.
Yeah, I mean, and you've seen your share of them for sure. That must have been like, it was almost like Christmas time to see Noah, and you have Wheeler, and you have DeGrom, and all those guys that you saw during your tenure. So it must have been amazing for sure. I do want to go back last week. There was a very controversial play that took place at Citi Field. Mets losing a 1-0 nail biter to the Chicago Cubs, and the game ended on a very highly controversial play when Pete Alonso was thrown out at home plate, when Cubs catcher Miguel Amaya blocked the plate, and Alonso was called out, being tagged, which was a bang bang play. However, that call was controversial because the catcher had his foot on the plate, and there's supposed to be a new rule in baseball. Carlos Mendoza runs out of the dugout after the play, and it's been going back and forth. A lot of people are saying, "What's going on with this rule?" Uh, what is your opinion of that call and the new rule regarding the catchers and blocking home plate?
Right. Well, obviously, it all started when Buster Posey got hurt real severely in San Francisco. They changed the rule where, you can't if the you can't run over the basically run over the catcher when he doesn't have the ball. So they said the catcher's got to get out of. You cannot block home plate without the baseball, and you have to allow the base runner a sliding area, a sliding. And most of it. So when the rule first came out, what most catchers did, and it really started with Yadi Molina, he got in front of home plate, kind of on the back side of home plate. And then as the ball approached, he would move still not in front of the plate, but towards, up towards the baseline a little bit in front of the plate. And he always knew where the runner was going to be. So it allowed him to make the play and do the tags. And that's what we taught. Well, in this particular play, the reason why it didn't get overturned is because he really didn't block the plate. He was on top of the plate. So he gave Pete actually the whole front, the in front, as he's coming down third baseline, that whole portion of the plate was open as the slide. And we saw Pete, and the reason he was out, as you saw, was that his hand got in, but he was up in the air. And so he tagged the hand that was above the plate, and that's why he was called out. And so, but the guy, as you saw, now once you have the ball, and if you were in front of the plate, you're free game. And that's why at that particular time, with him on top of the plate, Pete could have ran him over, and there would have been no interference calls or no obstruction or anything else. But and the other thing I thought about the play, if you review it, and I'm just telling you what I saw years ago and how we try to teach it. When there's a fly ball to left field and you tag up at third base, you can run inside that baseline. That base is inside the baseline. So you can go right down that inside. And now that catcher has to look through you to receive that ball. And maybe it would have helped a little bit, because if you saw Pete got over towards the baseline itself and kind of gave that catcher a little bit better of a view. But it was a tough play. And again, it all comes a lot of times, John, in some of these new rulings, interpretation by that particular crew. If he blocked the plate. Now they go to a crew that's in New York, in the facility in New York, who were in the review center. They may have a different interpretation of the call. So, it's got to be tough. And there, a lot of times, and believe me, they're going to get letters. They're going to have people come in from the office and review the play again. But there is no set thing until all the umpires kind of get together and make what they consider the best call. But, I again, when I saw it, I said, he's got to be safe. And then when I saw the replay and saw that he actually had a plate part that he could slide into, and that had he been able to keep his hand down, he would have been safe. So I got why they didn't overrule it.
Yeah, that was a crazy play. One of the craziest plays I've seen, especially with the plate but also Pete's hand. I mean, it was just kind of like this bang bang play, and it cost him the game. It was only it was a 1-0 win, but it was just
11th inning, wasn't it? I think
yeah,
11th inning.
11th inning.
Yeah,
11th inning was one of the craziest endings to a game I'd seen. But
yeah,
that's
it was
that's the
crazy.
Mets. That's the Mets. That's what happens sometimes. Let's go back into some Mets history, Terry, and. On April 29, 2022, the Mets threw their second no-hitter in franchise history against the Philadelphia Phillies. Tyler McGill, Joely Rodriguez, Seth Lugo, and Edwin Diaz combined to not allow a hit in a 3-0 victory. But do these combined no-hitters, and a lot of people make a big deal out of them these days, should they be celebrated like an individual performance for a no-hitter?
Well, they should be celebrated because it's a no hitter, and even though there were 5 guys, but it's not like the individual going out there who's throwing 110 pitches, who's gone through the line. He's in the lineup 4th time through the lineup. Say, and he's made 2 or 3 walks, and he's had to pitch out of jams, and he's still out there. He's getting a little tired, and yet make no mistake about it, they know they're pitching a no hitter, so there's adrenaline still flowing in that body. And to be able to have that individual guy get that last out, that is really, really special. I mean, I saluted all. I was there when they had a little bit of with the Johan celebration, and those 5 guys came out, and it was great. I mean, but that's one of the things about why you have bullpens is you give the other team different looks all the time. So you've got a starter that gives you 5, and next thing you know, here come 4 more guys. You have a different look each inning, so it's a little tough to get rhythm when you go to home plate. So it's a little different situation than it is to have that individual guy do it. And I think that's a tremendous feat when one guy goes 9 innings, especially in today's game.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, totally. It's always a special event for sure. I'm going to go back now to May 1st, 2011, during an ESPN national game on Sunday night. The Mets and Phillies playing, crowd at Citizen Bank Park erupted with a USA, USA chant in the top of the ninth inning. News circulated in the ballpark that Osama bin Laden had been killed by U.S. Special Forces. The Mets won that game 2-1. It was your first season as skipper. What do you remember from that night, and what was the atmosphere like in that ballpark when that news began spreading?
Well, when when we were in the dugout and we started hearing the chants, guys were saying, "What happened? What happened?" Well, as you always know, not every player is in the dugout the whole game. So a lot of times they'll go back up and get some water, or they'll change a shirt or something. And on TV they saw in the clubhouse that Osama bin Laden had been taken care of, and so they came back in the dugout and they said, "We got Osama bin Laden," and you should have saw the guys on the bench erupt. I mean, they were so excited, and now they got caught up in the USA, and you just had goosebumps on you. You were, I mean, that's one of our national prides is, we love our country so much. And when something good happens, everybody's happy about it. And there was ecstasy in the dugout at the time and in the entire ballpark, but you couldn't escape how exciting it was.
Yeah, it was 10 years after 9/11, almost 10 years, and everybody wanted that guy. And when they got him and it erupted and was on national TV, it was a special moment for sure. But Terry, another special moment took place when you were skipper, May 7th, 2016, Petco Park, San Diego. Bartolo Colon shocked the world in the second inning when, with a man on first base, Padres pitcher James Shield grooved a nice 91 mile per hour fastball that Cologne connected with, and the baseball sailed into the left field stands for a home run, the first and only home run of Cologne's career at age 42, making him the oldest player in history to hit his first over the fence home run at that age. A great moment. We're going to take a look at the clip, and then we're going to get your response on what was going through your mind when you witnessed that historic event.
Colon looking for his first hit of the year. He drives one deep left field. Back goes Upton. Back near the wall. It's out of here. Bartolo has done it. The impossible has happened. The team vacates the dugout as Bartolo takes the long trot, his first career home run, and there will be nobody in the dugout to greet him. This is one of the great moments in the history of baseball. Bartolo Colon has gone deep.
I want to say that was one of the longest home run trots I've ever seen, but I think that's how fast he runs.
And now they'll flood up the tunnel and give him his just due. His 226th career at bat. You knew if he ever made contact in just the right way, he was strong enough to do it.
That was amazing. Terry, what was going through your mind when you witnessed that?
Well, to precede that, Pat Ressler, who was our assistant hitting coach, Pat was in charge of pitchers' batting practices. And so, and they didn't hit much on the road. And once in a while, the starting pitcher would get in the cage and take a few swings because they had to get ready to pitch. But Pat told me one day, he said, "You know what?" He said, "Bartolo, he hates hitting. But I'm going to tell you something." He said, "One of these days, he's going to run into a fastball and ambush somebody." Well, sure enough, it happened that night. And when he hit the ball, I was standing next to me, the pitching coach, and I said, "You got to be kidding." And the guys on the bench went crazy, and they all came. Everybody got to get out of the dugout. We got to get out of the dugout. And I couldn't get out. I said, this is one of the biggest moments in this guy's life. So I need to at least shake his hand. So I was the only guy that stayed in there besides David Wright, who was on deck. And it was just the coolest moment because he, without a question, is one of the great individuals who's ever played this game and one of the best pros. And it was a coolest thing that ever happened. And, again, every guy in that dugout, was so happy for him. It was really cool.
Yeah, I'm actually wearing my game issued Bartolo Colon official jersey that I picked up at the City Field memorabilia shop
You know,
a couple of
you
seasons
said
ago.
before the clip came on that it was the one that oldest guy ever to hit one over the fence. Make no mistake, he wasn't hitting an inside the park home run ever. So that was about as hard as hell. He ran a little harder than that, but he didn't run that much harder than that.
It was a joy to watch, and it was a joy
Yeah,
to see the seven-line army there as well, and all those Met fans.
yeah.
It was what a magical moment, Terry. All the New York Mets history. You could actually go to X. There's a great account there. It's at NYM History on X, and I check it out every day. There's some really cool stuff there because what a history the franchise has had over the years. Terry, right now it's going to go to the Talkin with TC segment, and today you've assembled some really good, historic, knowledgeable, experienced pitching coaches. We do have to do a little bit of a disclaimer because we did promote Dan Worthen on social media, and unfortunately, Dan couldn't be here today. But you got Dave Wallace, who worked under Bobby Valentine, 1999, 2000. Both seasons saw the Mets in the playoffs, including the 2000 World Series. And then Rick Honeycutt, 20-year Major League veteran pitcher, went on to become a longtime pitching coach for the Dodgers. So why don't we do this, Terry? Why don't we go to that segment that we taped because it's time for Talking with TC. All right, on Talking with TC, here we go. Terry, we got some very special guests lined up for us talking about the state of pitching in Major League Baseball today.
I sure do, John. I've got three of my really good friends who are three of the best pitching coaches that have ever graced the fields, and they're all pitchers themselves, and have all been associated with great teams. And one of them is Rick Honeycutt, who when Rick retired, he got into coaching, and when I was the minor league director, we hired him as the minor league pitching coach of the Dodgers at the time, and he turned our entire minor league pitching around. Then he went from that job to the long-term pitching coach's job with the Dodgers. Obviously, they had all those great runs and finally retired. And I'm honored to have him on the show. Rick, thanks for coming on.
Sure, Terry. Right back.
Yeah, so one of the things we'd like to try to do, Rick, with the issue going on with pitching today, with all of the injuries, I know you guys have some ideas on what possibly the reasons might be. And I've got, numbers of questions, but if you could, in your mind, with what you've seen in the recent history of all these guys that are pitching that have been hurt, what do you think needs to be changed to try to keep the health better?
Well, it really has come to a head with so many injuries, arm injuries. I mean, the game has changed so much where nobody's even completing games anymore. There's not even, if they go 5 or 6 innings, everybody's happy. And so I'm not sure that's, I'm not saying that leads to it. My biggest thing is, I know still doing some stuff with the Dodgers and over the last few years, but everything's max effort. And even in their sides, especially like in our minor league seasons, or even their bullpens in spring training, they got the track man and they're giving them the numbers. And everybody, after they make a throw, they want to hear what the numbers are. And, I read a thing just the other day. It said in 2023, just in professional ball, this isn't high school or just across the country, just in professional baseball, in 2023, there was more Tommy John surgeries than there was the whole decade of the 90s. So that tells you right there, something has changed, something has happened, and to the level of, you hardly ever really even, you had 2, maybe 3 in the whole organization, especially in the minor leagues. I mean, guys would have, Quo had the issue. We had a couple of other guys, but I mean, it was not the epidemic that it is now. I mean, you're reading about a Tommy John surgery, and at the big league level, it seems like every week now. And I think just looking back, I think a lot of the training is part of it. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? That's one of my questions was that I wrote down. One of the things they're talking about today, and as you said, they're looking at numbers. Well, they're all looking at spin rates, and now the fact that they can't, they've taken away the guys that put something on there to help get a better grip, and and so now these spin rates. These guys have got to create, extra effort, arm speed to try to create the numbers that they want, that the organizations want to see out of these guys. So for me, one of the problems is, the analytics with these different rates and different numbers these guys got to see. They're trying to kill themselves to get their numbers to where they have a chance to move up.
Well, the spin rate obviously is one thing. Like I said, when the track man, I mean, every number, depending on what they're trying to do, they're all interested in the vertical rise that they have on their fastball. And then they're looking at the spin rates on the breaking pitches and the speed of the breaking pitches. You're seeing a lot more when they started talking about the sweeper here that came in several years ago. And I just think, one thing about the Dodger organization, I know when I came there, they were more concerned about fastball, curveball, changeup. They weren't even crazy about throwing sliders in the Dodger organization. They thought fastball, curveball, changeup, so the arm's working. Kershaw, when I taught him the slider, Kersh said, I just don't want my arm going. I want to, whatever grip you show me, my hand is wanting to go. He's one of the few guys that throws pretty much a top to bottom slider. It doesn't have the horizontal break that you're seeing from a lot of people. Yeah, Kersh has never really had much elbow injury. He's had back injuries, and he last year had some things with his shoulder. But there's part about one of the things that we always taught was grip and what we were trying to do with the grip pressure. We weren't Sandy and Dave. They wanted to look at our grips, and then we worked off of the four seam fastball for all of our pitches. And I think too much now they're getting on the side of the baseball, which creates a horizontal movement with the arm. And if you talk to the orthopedic doctors, your elbow works in a certain way, kind of like if you were hammering. You don't hammer sideways; you hammer straight on. That's what I'm talking about. And so that joint works in a best proficient way to work straight, for a high kind of a high three quarters. And I just think that the training now has gotten to the point with the weighted balls, to the amount of throwing that they're doing, and the max velocity every time they touch the mound is pretty much causing some of the issues, because maybe you're not letting the arm recover properly. And as Dr. Job always said, that ligament is really only made to throw X amount of miles per hour. And after you start throwing more and more at that higher level, that ligament eventually is going to give. And but they're doing. I mean, we're signing guys out of high school in the mid '90s. Almost all the college guys. So the velocity's there. Now we got to look at how do we do the other things to protect. I wish I had the exact answer. I don't know, but just like I said earlier, the amount of surgeries that happened in the '90s compared to doing it all, that many in just one year tells us that we're looking in the wrong direction. And I heard one doctor say, he says, maybe we should go back to, a Maddox and Glavine type where they control the baseball and they're not trying to throw the ball at max effort every throw.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to welcome to the show another one of my good friends and one of the best pitching coaches I've ever been around. And Rick already mentioned his name, Dave Wallace. Dave's a former pitching coach with the Dodgers, the Mets, the Red Sox, the Baltimore Orioles. Still works today with a lot of pitchers who are trying to make comebacks from injuries. And I know Dave's investigated a lot of some of the causes that he thinks might be a reason why we're seeing this tremendous increase in injuries to the elbow. So, Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on with you and Rick, and talking truly about our passion, guys. I think we all feel the same way. And, like Terry said, I have, since retiring full time, been chasing this thing because I go on social media and I see what's being taught. And there are so many layers to this that we probably don't have time to discuss them all. Rick touched on a few things, and the max velocity on side pieces, the training. I've been to every place in the United States except I have not been to Thread, and I'm trying to get there. But I've gone to Driveline, ASMI. I'm down here in Jupiter. I go to Cressy's place all the time, and Utah with a lab out there, the studies that are going on. And this strength and conditioning stuff is guys are spending more time getting stronger at an earlier age. And I believe, Rick, as you alluded to, their bodies just aren't ready to maintain that strength. And you're finding Tommy Johns in high school, junior colleges, guys are getting drafted after they already had a Tommy John. They pitch a couple of years and now they're having their second one. Spencer Strider's a perfect case. In Clemson, he had one. Now it's not a Tommy John, but it's an elbow injury. And there are so many reasons. We don't know definitely what the one reason is because there's not one reason. There's a whole plethora of things that are going on. I think that starts at the youth level and it goes right in through high school. And I think these poor kids are victims of social media listening to guys out there. And I'm sure the intent is good. They want to help young kids. But when you talk about rotational deliveries, I mean, that's just the antithesis of what goes on. A pitching delivery is a linear movement with maybe a rotational finish. Does rotational deliveries increase velocity? Yes, but at what cost? And it does not help command. There's just so many things, and we can go on and on and on. Guys are chasing velocity, throwing bullpens at 100%. And I've heard people say, in order to throw hard, you got to throw your bullpens hard. I mean, it's crazy. There's the pitching is lost, the art. Somebody asked me the other day, is pitching an art or a science? I said, well, it's really both. There's some good science and good information that's come up in the last few years. We all know that, and we all accept it, and we all embrace it. However, the art of pitching, I think, sometimes is lost. And these poor kids are faced with a choice of, I'm only going to get the sign if I throw 95. So they're chasing it at 14, 15, 16 years old, trying to throw hard. Hell, I've got a grandson who's 12 that wants to throw hard. And I'm fighting with my daughter about that stuff. But I mean, it's just crazy. Kids aren't playing enough sports. They're playing baseball 12. Every parent thinks their kid's going to be the next, Justin Verlander. And speaking of that, I heard Justin on a podcast or on an interview just saying, and it made a lot of sense. Why can't we just chase our natural abilities, see where it takes us, and evaluate that as time goes on? And I think that's some of the answer. But the training, the lack of throwing, all the weighted ball stuff, all the reverse throws, those things, I've studied them all. And they come with a plus and a minus. And unfortunately, the minus is the injury rate is 40, 50, 60%. Depends on which one you're doing. But I mean, I can speak from experience seeing the minor leagues in the last year or two. 18, 19-year-old high prospect high school kids out of spring training, they throw one time a week. They throw for 5 innings, 75 pitches, never allowed to get out of a jam, never allowed to go through any adversity. And then they throw one side piece for the rest of the week at 20 pitches. But those other 5 days, they are in doing so much strengthening and conditioning. Yes, they're getting stronger. It's probably helping velocity. But the other key word that Rick hit on, there's never mention of 2 things in my mind: recovery and biomechanics. There's some bad deliveries out there. And I'm not sure how many guys really, really know how to teach it. And it's unfortunate. And I'm probably going on and on. But I mean, this thing is like I said, it's got so many layers that we can discuss it forever. I've talked to orthopedic guys. Go ahead, T. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So one of the things, guys, I wanted to ask is that, with the new rules today about, getting on the mound and throwing, do you think that has anything to do with the fact that, some of these, they're almost rushing hey, they only got X amount of seconds to get to throw another pitch. Do you think there's that kind of a rule? Because I read where the Players Association thought that might be one of the issues, that these guys, aren't allowed to have enough for their arm to recover for the next delivery. Do you think you guys believe in that? Is there any credence to that?
I'll answer a little bit of that. I mean, Kershaw, his whole career, he got the ball back and threw it. So, and fortunately, he's never had to have Tommy John surgery. Greg Maddux, I had him twice. We picked him up twice. Quickest workers I've ever been around. Now, other guys, you got a Kenley Jansen who hasn't had elbow injuries, but Kenley takes 30 seconds in between pitches. So that was the way he trained. He was just a slow moving kind of guy, except for the arm when he threw it to the plate. I think that part you can train. That's part of just, that's one aspect of it. But I go with Dave as far as the training in between has much more to do with the issues. I'm not saying that the grip thing doesn't have some. I mean, you got to feel the baseball. You got to feel the seams. And I've even the last years I was pitching coach, you get a new bucket of balls out there for the bullpens, and I get them, have balls ready for they threw one in the dirt or whatever, and each ball had a different feel, it seemed like. The
we've
baseball
heard that.
itself and the slickness to it.
When was that?
But,
16, Rick, they changed the baseball?
Yeah, approximately that time, yeah.
Okay.
That was
so,
Dave.
The time in between, I think you can train. That's kind of just an endurance. You do have the ability, though, to step off twice. So I'm not running on that as much as the other things that really Dave hit on most of it. Most of it is the training in between. No, you don't see too many guys that have. At the big league level, you do, but you see down below a lot more where guys aren't balanced on their finish. I mean, you're trying to transfer your weight from a balanced position to a balanced position, and that landing leg is so important. But you see, like Wally was talking about, these rotational deliveries, they can't hold their land.
Correct.
The force is to slow that arm down or to the arm. The arm has to do the slowing down process instead of the big muscles slowing the arm down.
So, one of the things, guys, that I've been watching or listening to is that all these pitchers now, because of what the hitters are doing now with their launch angles, they all have to pitch up in the strike zone. And so, and that's where the velocity has to come in, because that's such a hard pitch to get to. And so I thought, that has transferred the fact that the hitters have changed. Now they're taking pitchers and trying to make them be different. I mean, I look at Noah Syndergaard, who, was very successful throwing 100-mile-an-hour two-seam fastballs and getting easy outs down in the strike zone. And the minute they said, you got to start getting the ball up because you throw hard, he gets hurt. I mean, it's to me, I look at that and I know you guys have talked mechanics, but that's what I believe. Sometimes we're taking guys and we're making them do things they're not, physically ready to do or capable of doing.
No, I agree, T. I think it comes down to, it used to be, this is the way, that's the way, it's the Dodger way, it's the Yankee way, it's whoever. There's no way. Noah Syndergaard, 6'5", 230, 240. Greg Maddux is what, 5'11", 6 feet, 190. Pedro's 5'11", at the time pitching, 185. I mean, the makeup of your body dictates so much in your delivery, what you can do and can't do. We're asking guys to do something they're not capable of doing. And one example I'll give is, we had a pitcher in L.A. 2 years ago. He'd be a perfect candidate for the sweeper because he was not a candidate for the curveball. That was Ramon, because of his arm angle. So I think we have to look at deliveries, and as a good pitching coach does, like Rick does, like, Roger does, like a lot of guys I know, okay, this guy is a candidate for this pitch because of his delivery arm angle. And his natural arm angle comes from where the lower half of his body takes him. It comes up the kinetic link. That's what tells us who is a candidate for those things. I've had guys, 7, 8, 9 big league veterans, pitchers, come up to the big leagues and not know the difference in a four-seam fastball, which was a high seam or low seam. And that's what creates spin, the long, strong finger on the right seam. So it's grips, it's that. We're asking guys to, just happenstance, like you said, T. Hey, just throw it up as hard as you can. I mean, you know, there's Sean Gilmartin was 89, 90. He went to an organization and they told the guy to throw high fastballs as hard as you can. He goes, hey, I only throw 89. I mean, it's just, so again, it's an individual thing. We have to be careful in this industry of who we're talking to, what kind of education they have, perception they have, what they understand, what they don't understand, and let them make a choice, but give them some honest, upfront answers. Say, you want to pitch 8 or 9 or 10 years? And even if you're not a big stud star, you're going to be healthy and make some money. Or do you want to chase everything that's being taught and risk maybe? I mean, how many guys now are not even getting arbitration because they're just blown out after 3 years? That's the sad part. And that's why I think all of us continue to try to figure this thing out.
Yep, I agree. John, you got anything, questions for these two guys? Because I know you've researched some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely do. Thank you, gentlemen. Glad that you're here. What can you tell us about describing the roles on how those roles of a pitching coach have changed over these last several years?
I'll give you a little.
Go ahead, Rick.
I mean, when I first started coaching, I mean, it was more the things I learned from Dave and Sandy really was down in the minor leagues. We were teaching mechanics, proper mechanics. They've got a good arm and they wouldn't have been drafted. Now you try to simplify their mechanics so that they help. Things for me were when I first came in, and Dan was my bullpen coach, Dan Wortham, and we just had an advanced scouting report, but so the pitcher's basically trying to figure out, and I said, you learn off the swings. Well, now you got so much information, all this video, you have all these different metrics that you can go through. So you're doing more time video work, more time preparing. And so that part has changed dramatically for me was the information that you had to decipher yourself and then try to get across to your pitchers and your catchers.
Right. Hey, Rick, I know you got to go, but I just want to thank you for being on today. I'm going to keep the conversation going with Dave a little bit, but I really appreciate your input and thanks for coming on.
All right, guys, I appreciate it. Always good to see Wally's happy face right there.
Yeah, right. Talk to you, honey. All right, man. Shit.
Thank you. We'll see you guys.
Thank you.
Let's go win a doubleheader.
There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
So Dave, one of the things, I've tried to do some, just as I watch and listen to when I watch games and stuff. And, and you guys talked about throwing, I'm just wondering sometimes, all like when I was in Japan, I mean, these guys threw and threw and threw. Now they weren't into the weights like we are in the United States, but, they conditioned their shoulder to deal with stuff, to deal with, throw a number of pitches. And here, we limit these guys to 70 pitches and stuff, and max effort them. I mean, I'm wondering if we don't condition in their shoulders well enough so that they can get through even 70 pitches.
Well, and as I said, if you have high school kids and young college guys, anybody in the minor leagues, in 2023, where I was, not one pitcher threw 100 innings. Leaving the Atlanta organization, which was where I was real active, and we had 3 guys in Double-A, Max Fried, Mike Soroka, Tuki Toussaint, and a few other guys. They threw 150, 160 innings. So when you get to the big leagues, to your point, T, you're trained. There in the 5th inning, you got 89, 90 pitches, runner on second base and 1 out. What's the matter with leaving the guy in there to let him learn how to navigate through that? I think that's part of teaching. We have to do that. And when you only throw 75 pitches and you're only throwing 70 or 80 innings as a young kid, and, I know the idea is to protect them, but at some point, my goodness gracious, you have to build up innings. And to the question about being a pitching coach today, I think especially in the minor leagues and the major leagues, but every single day is different. You have to watch a guy. If I'm watching a pitcher throw 4 innings and he's only got 55 pitches and he's real efficient and it's not any trouble, you keep going. Now, the next night, it could be a guy that he's in the fourth inning. He's got 78 pitches, 2 runners on, errors, walks, base on balls. I mean, that's really tough. That's much more draining on a guy physically than the guy going through the game easy. So I think we have to, like we were taught. I mean, coach the coaches, the younger coaches today coming up to recognize all that stuff. It's a daily process. There is no one answer to how to become good at that trade. You have to know personalities. You have to know different cultures. My goodness gracious, I think, one year there in LA, we said hello, good morning in 4 languages, Korean, Japanese, Spanish, and English. So really, I mean, and then you get a high school kid out of the Midwest somewhere, or you get a cum laude student out of Stanford that asks you questions, somebody like Hershiser who gets himself out of whack to put you to the test. So there's a whole wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience one has to have. I mean, these guys today, I mean, where I go see good guys, they're going to be good. They want to get into the game as a pitching coach in the big leagues tomorrow. And then when they get there, they call and say, hey, this is different. Yeah, it is. It's personalities, it's trust, it's, trusting your bullpen coach, your manager, and you get along, have the right to agree and disagree. It sounds almost too elementary to be true, but communication, knowledge, the kids come up with, they're brilliant young guys today with all this information and the spin rates and the approach angles and all that. That is really good stuff, and it's very useful. However, the key point to teaching is when to hit. Don't shoot the gun unless it's loaded. If you have a young pitcher and he trusts you, and you feel like he's at the point now where he can handle that, let's give it to him. I've had several young pitchers in the Brave organization get pissed off at me because we didn't teach them something a year earlier, but they weren't ready for it. However, when they're ready for it, they took it, ran with it, became successful, and more importantly, stayed healthy.
Yeah. I look at some of the things, Dave, and, you and Rick both were talking about, not getting deep into games, but, this is, again, we go back to what the numbers are dictating, and that is 70, these 70, 75 pitches, the numbers say that's when you start to lose stuff. And so now the managers today, the pitching coaches today, hey, look, that's the limit. That's going to be the limit. The 3 times through the lineup, is another thing. And I remember, and I'm not a pitching guy, but I listen to my pitchers a lot. And I remember Chuck Finley, who I had in Anaheim, who was one of the best pitchers I was around, said, as you said, every night's different. He said, Terry, there's nights where it's easy. I feel good. 120 pitches is easy. And there's other nights where 65 pitches is hard. And I think now we are so ingrained into what the numbers say that, because it's analytics has taken over so much that I think it's hindering the pitching coach and the manager from, using his gut and saying, hey, tonight, he's got it tonight. Let him go a little bit longer. And so now it's every 5th day or something, 75 pitches is it. These guys, they're just not physically ready to go any farther.
Right. And let me interject this, and it just came to my mind, so excuse but one of the things you brought up was true. Is the pitch clock, is that maybe part of it? I don't know. I mean, maybe to some degree, but what that led me to think was, well, wait a minute now. Here we have a pitch clock in the minor leagues and in the major leagues, but when guys are throwing sides in between starts, it takes them about almost a half hour to throw 20, because what they're doing is they make a pitch, they turn around and look at the iPad and wanted to know where it was, what the spin rate was, what was the vertical angle, what was the horizontal, measurement and all that stuff. And then they throw the next pitch. So how do you go from that? Now I'm in a game. I got to throw a pitch within 18 seconds. Risk reward. Where does that happen? So, maybe because of training like that and they get in a game and it has to be quick. I'm not sure, but that's got to be a little bit of a component of what goes on.
Yeah. John, you got anything else?
Yeah, I mean, is it also a fact that now, even in January, when these guys are starting up, they're just going right at it and they're throwing so fast. And you have January, February, March, April, May, June, July. You have the whole season, and they're not segueing and progressing. They're just going right at it, and they're throwing 90, 95 miles an hour in January. And there's a long season ahead. Could that have a could that be another factor?
That's a good point. Yes, that could be because I see it firsthand. I had two kids down here that are professional pitchers in the minor leagues, and one of the conversations was, "Hey, it's January 28th. You don't go to spring training for minor league spring training for a month. You've already thrown 10 bullpens, and the last five have been maxed." So to answer your question, I think without a doubt, and again, that's lack of communication, preparation, information on whoever that lays on to lay out the program, throw a few bullpens, come into spring training, and it's different in the major league and the minor leagues. It's just so different. But there's no reason that stuff can't be handled and it can't be put into place. That's a very good point.
Dave, on that, and John, on that point, it happened this past spring. There was a game that I was at, one of the Mets games, where the pitcher, he was 91, 92, and I'm telling you, the writers went crazy. Where's his velocity? His velocity's not, and it was his first start. I mean, and so now they're reading into it and they're being questioned. Hey, where's your velocity? So they're saying, well, geez, I got to amp it up here. I remember one spring when Matt Harvey was coming back from an injury. He'd had like 2 or 3 starts, and he'd throw his 40 pitches and he did maybe 55 pitches. And he was like 92, 93. And the writers were panicked, writing stories that, hey, look, this injury, he hasn't recovered from his injury. So one day we're playing in the Cardinals, and he threw one pitch in that game, which he had lots of games left in the spring training, 100, threw one pitch 100. And I said, what was that? And he said, I just had to show everybody I'm okay. And so again, these
Wow.
guys get beaten up by panics from front office people or the media. Hey, look, what's wrong here? The velocity's not up.
Yeah, 100%.
Now they're all chasing it. They're all chasing the velocity, and but is it kind of too late now? Because even the young executives that are coming into the game, as Terry pointed out, everything is analytical driven, and everyone's going after the spin rate and the velocity. So how do you fix it? I mean, is there a fix? How do you fix it? Because the younger people that are coming in are just training these guys in a different manner than you did.
Well, I mean, in all respect to everybody, um, my question is this. All of a sudden next year, and correct me if I'm wrong, T, you probably know better than I, you can only have 12 pitchers on your staff, right? So we're
Yep.
going to flip the switch, and we want guys to go deeper in the game. So what does that mean? And they changed the rules as far as it's not 10 days now, you got to go down. It's 2 weeks, 15 days. So all those things are come into play. And John, to answer your question, I don't know how, more importantly, when, but if I would be concerned if I was involved in the Players Association because those young pitchers, especially relief pitchers, they are getting abused and not able to get to arbitration. Starters aren't ready to go, and that's the other thing. You talk about training starting pitchers. If you throw 150 innings in Double A or Triple A, I would say that's probably 120 in the major leagues because of the intense concentration. So it's it's just a different animal that you can't replicate, but you can train differently. Hopefully, John, there's going to be a couple of young guys that come in. There are a couple of guys around, whether they get in known positions or not, are finally asking questions about that stuff. Say, hey, what are we going to do here? Because there is an epidemic, and there is billions of dollars at stake. But more importantly, young human beings are really being deprived of making a really good living, and they are, you know, maybe we educate guys to say, hey, these are your choices, and leave it on them. but at least give them a choice. I think when you mandate anything, it makes it really hard.
Absolutely does. Terry, we had a few questions from some fans out there. Can I give a
Absolutely.
couple out? But first, before we get to a question, we did get a comment. It wasn't a question, but Dave, it comes from Johnny Franco
Okay, here we
on,
go.
on Terry's Instagram account. And he follows Terry, and he's been commenting on some things. He says, "Tell Dave he was my favorite pitching coach with the Dodgers and the Mets. He always tells it like it is, and he straightened me out."
Oh, I appreciate it. Hey, Terry, do you remember that story, how we straightened them out?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah.
When I was talking to John and I, we were talking about putting a show together on pitching. One of the things I thought we got to get some pitchers on here too. Guys that
Yeah.
in recent years. And one of the first guys that came to my mind was John Franco. But I'm going to use him in another show. So yeah. But I remember we all loved him, and we obviously at that particular time the Dodgers made a pretty big mistake trading him.
That was, and it's funny because, I mean, second guessing is like a second opinion with a doctor. But Johnny, we talked about deliveries and arm angles and all that, was gifted with a real good fastball that had good life on it. And he had a tremendous changeup that he learned, I think, in our instructional league. But, Terry, during those meetings, the organization meetings, why can't we teach John Franco a curveball? And John Franco did not have the delivery or the arm angle. If you taught him a curveball, he would lose the other two pitches. So
Right.
he's traded and goes to say 425, I think, games or something like that because of his
Yeah.
makeup and the way he is.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I got one more. This comes from our ex account, Baseball Scout 12, Carl Triano. Are there any pitchers that you wish you could have worked with as their pitching coach, past or present?
There's a whole bunch as I watched the game today. And I think the other thing is that when I was in Baltimore, I had a bullpen coach named Don Cheedy. And I've never had a better one because all we were concerned about was the player. And I think what happens a lot now is everybody wants to put their name on somebody and be the reason this guy did that. And don't get me wrong, there are some really good coaches out there, really good pitching guys. I can name a bunch of them. But for the most part, do what's right for the young guy. And I remember asking so many questions. We were learning and still learning. I can't believe how much I don't know and still trying to learn. But, and tell the guy, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but let me go find out and do some research. And who is your pitching coach were in college or in high school? Let's call them. Once those guys sense that you have their best interests and you want to get what's right for them, no matter where it comes from, now you have something. And I think, unfortunately, that doesn't happen enough.
Thank you.
All right. Well, David, as always, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for your input. And we had some technical difficulties earlier to get everybody on the same page here at the same time. But, you and Rick are outstanding. And thanks so much for being on. And hopefully we can get together again and talk some more ball.
Appreciate it. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. Take care.
Thank you. It was great to have those guys on, Terry. Really fantastic to hear their insights on what's going on with the state of Major League pitching today.
Yeah, John, they are both outstanding pitching coaches. And I'm going to tell you, when you know how good the pitching coaches are when to this day, like Dave Wallace, he gets calls from Mike Soroka. He gets calls from Spencer Strider. He gets calls from guys that he's had down the road, Zach Britton. And I mean, they still contact Dave. They'll send him tapes. And the same with Rick. I mean, Rick, obviously, Rick was my minor league pitching coach. He ran it when I was the farm director with the Dodgers. I hired Rick as to run the minor league pitching. And our first spring together, we signed our number one pick. We signed a guy named Clayton Kershaw, and we brought Clayton in June down to Vero Beach, and Rick took him out to the bullpen and came after Clayton threw his sideline. Rick came over to me and he said, "Have you ever seen this guy throw?" And I said, "No." He goes, "You wait. This is really something special." And so here Rick was a mini, he started out with helping Clayton. I mean, he had Billingsley, Broxton, Quo. I mean, some of the great pitchers that came through the Dodger organization, they were responsible for Rick Honeycutt. And Rick, during his thing, you saw him mention Sandy, and that's Sandy Koufax. And Rick brought Sandy Koufax's theory of pitching, which Dave Wallace also believes in, and he changed our minor league pitching completely with the way he went about things. And there's a lot of those kids that owe their careers to Rick Honeycutt and Dave Wallace.
Yeah, baseball needs more of those types of guys in the game right now, especially training these young pitchers, because what's going on, and everyone heard the discussion. There's a lot of problems right now in the world of baseball with pitching. Terry, we're going to turn and actually get some questions to you from some of the fans and ask the skipper segment. We got a few, and the first one comes in actually from X. And this is a really good question to follow up that last Talkin with TC. And that dude Chico on X asked, who was the hardest working pitcher that you ever managed?
That I ever managed? Well, I've had a lot of them. I will tell you, there's a guy in Houston named Shane Reynolds who was one of the hardest working guys I've ever seen. Tremendous shape, ran like crazy, exercised, flexibility off the charts. He was a tremendously hard worker. Chuck Finley in Anaheim, another guy that just tirelessly kept himself ready. And I went to New York, and I'll tell you, we had, Dan did a great job with a lot of those guys. But I'm obviously, when you look at what Noah Syndergaard does to keep himself ready, Matt Harvey, I mean, they never missed a day, stretching and doing their jobs. And those guys, I mean, they kept themselves, those young guys there. And Jake, of course, is a little taller and skinnier than the other guys. But, Steven Matz was in great shape. Harvey was in great shape. Noah was in great shape. And those guys, I never had to worry about those guys not being prepared physically to do their jobs.
Well, thank you for that question. That dude Chico on X. And the next question comes from one of our subscribers on YouTube. It's actually two questions. Terry, outside of baseball, what are some of the things you enjoy doing most now that you're not managing?
It's easy. I play golf. I try to play as much as I can, as often as I can. I love it. It gets me away from, the phone. It gets me out there. And I still have this competitive attitude, but I'm not worried about beating the other guy. I'm worried about playing the course. I've spent 50 years trying to win baseball games. And so winning is not the point. The point is trying to get better and just enjoy my piece that golf brings.
Well, we know I was down in Port St. Lucie, and you love to hit that tee time, and you're just you love it. You have a passion for it, which is great. And the final question, also from YouTube, what is your all-time favorite baseball movie?
You know what? I think it's For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner. I actually met Kevin right after he did the movie. I was managing the Angels at the time. And, the story itself, the respect he had for the game was off the charts. He dedicated his entire life to it. And of course, at the end of the movie, he said, look, I'm going to retire rather than be traded because it's for the love of the game. It's time to get out. I think it says a lot about some of the great players that have ever played. They know that when the time has come that they're done, and it's a tough decision. So that's my favorite baseball movie.
Well, that completes Ask the Skipper. And if you'd like to ask Terry a question, just send an email to the Terry Collins Show at gmail.com, or just reply in the comments section on X, Facebook, or Instagram when we send out that request for the Ask the Skipper segment. Terry, another good one today. That'll wrap it up. And why don't you kind of tell the fans what you got in store for everybody next week?
Well, I'm very excited about next week. I've been trying to rack my brain here in the last to see what might be fun. And, with with what we went through today, talking about the pitching side of things of our sport today. I said, there's one phase that we kind of skip, and that is the way the game is. Everybody talks about the way the game has changed. Well, there's one guy who's lived the change from the old school to the new school, and his name is Buck Showalter. So next week, I'm going to have Buck on, and we're going to talk what it's like to manage in today as opposed to managing years ago. And nobody's going to do it better than he will.
Wow, that's very, very exciting to have you and Buck together on the same show. It's going to be amazing, really, Terry. That's going to be a good one. Well, I want to remind everybody you could follow Terry on X and Instagram and Facebook. And all you got to do is go to @TerryCollins_10 on X and Instagram. And now we're on TikTok as well, the Terry Collins Show. And on Facebook, the show page there, the Terry Collins Show. So don't forget to follow Terry on all of these platforms so you'll be first to get all the news when it comes to future episodes, and to really just kind of follow Terry on the socials. It's doing very well. You can follow me at John Arezzi on Instagram and on X. So make sure you subscribe also to our YouTube channel. Do that now, and you'll be informed when every new episode and every new piece of content drops. Well, until next time, this is John Arezzi for Terry Collins. Have a great week, everybody.